I've been talking about this one topic for such a long time, and I was in the middle of doing some research, and I came across a very little just part of this book. And I've talked about this book being the book that, even after a master's and after a doctoral degree, it made me realize that my mom had struggled with something like undiagnosed borderline. And it put all the pieces together for me, the stories especially, and at the core, the label, because it had been so stigmatized, didn't resonate for me for some reason. But when I read the stories in this book, they really did. And I saw myself, not necessarily in all of the stories, because some of them are quite extreme, but I felt like this is the essence of what it is. And yes, this book is older and there's some stigmatizing language, but I will say for adult children who have these parents who struggle, a book like that is incredibly validating because it makes you realize I'm not the bad child. I'm not the one who's broken and like they say I am, or selfish or ungrateful or spoiled or frankly a whole lot worse. So I was coming across this one section and I just wanted to share it with you because it really reinforces this one topic I'm so passionate about, which is how childhood wires us to engage in unconscious patterns that I think we don't obviously recognize. I think that's why so many of us find psychology so fascinating. Just go, oh, there is a connection there, not always a straight line, but the things I do make sense. And for example, why I might struggle in relationships makes sense. So these are 7 things that are unconscious behaviors we engage in when we have a parent where we walk on eggshells in some way. It could be narcissism, undiagnosed borderline, it could be ADHD, autism, all kinds of bipolar, but where the parent's essential ability to be generally consistent and regulated doesn't exist. This is talking though about BPD, and so there are some things specific to that, but I think you can apply this with whatever, way that your experience was, because we're really talking about emotional abuse. Number 1, when we have a sort of childhood where it's highly unpredictable, and these are often called highly invalidating environments, where we never truly feel seen and heard and understood. Number 1, we expect that our job is to decipher hidden meanings and messages in everything. So nothing that is said is really at, face value. There's always a underlying motivation, manipulation, gaslighting, intention, or harm. Number 2, we're often preoccupied with discovering what those hidden meanings are. So we're not just looking for them, okay, that doesn't match up, but we're often obsessed with going through our relationships today in our adult life. This is why it's a problem. Also, never really believing that people are giving us the full intention, right? There's always some other meaning, there's a motivation, and what is the motivation? And usually because we don't trust, it's not necessarily a good one. And sometimes this is a good skill, but oftentimes we don't even recognize that we're choosing the same partners, and we think we're being, we're scanning unconsciously, but we're actually reenacting a lot of the original trauma. Number 3, we're suspicious when things are going well. So we just don't trust. The minute things get good, it's like we can't lean into that. That's terrifying because we're so used to the other shoe always dropping. Number 4, we often fear that others will take advantage of us. So because we don't trust in things for face value, and we don't have these beliefs that people have good, essential motives at times, we actually really struggle. Number 5 is that we never know where we stand in relationships. And so this is that whole attachment dance. Like, if you have both anxious and avoidant qualities, which many children of moms or dads or caregivers who have something like BPD might have a more disorganized attachment system, where it's like even when the person's telling us, no, I love you, I care for you, we don't necessarily believe them, we don't trust that, or they're wanting too much from us, so we wall up. So it's like this, like we're almost always on shaky ground. Even if the relationship seems fine, inside it can feel really unstable or unpredictable to us. Number 6 is that we often search for validation because we grew up in a highly invalidating environment. In our adult lives and even through childhood, we're always trying to be validated. So it's through working, grades, performance, or it could be an active response against that, right? Where we engage in self-harm or self-sabotage in some way. But even in that, we're looking for validation. We're looking to feel seen and heard and loved and accepted, maybe with the wrong people or the wrong ways, and or we're just never good enough. That is that root of the inner critic trying to keep us perfect so we'll finally be loved. And so this can be a real setup for things like workaholism and busyism, right? Only feeling valuable when you're delivering and performing, and if you're not doing anything, then you're not valuable. So that can be a real challenge. And the last thing is all of this manifests in hypervigilance and chronic hypervigilance. So we're not just scanning and looking for things and changes of mood or mind or facial expressions or body language, that we live in a state of just persistent fear of threat. And it's like our smoke detector is going off all of the time. And that's really what it said. And this is often so unconscious. And what I've said is it becomes who we are. I am a highly vigilant person, not just in childhood, but in every relationship. And so it's like I'm always sensitive to what's changing or scanning. And then the second part of this as children is that we often believe it is our role to fulfill the needs of whatever we've detected. So mommy's mad, I must please her and take care of her. This need to respond creates compulsive caregiving and caretaking and people pleasing, and it can truly make us, literally not know our own needs, sacrifice our own needs, neglect ourselves in the service of taking care of others, because so many of these parents, not maybe meaning to, but because of their dysfunction or their trauma, their harm, whatever, use their children to emotionally regulate them. And we believe that is our job. So today I would just encourage you, if that's you, to just notice how often do you pay attention to people's, the sound of the tires in the driveway when your spouse comes home, or their tone of voice, or how much you look for pattern changes. And if you are also autistic, it's very likely you had trauma. It's very likely you also have some form of emotional harm, because it's just more common in general. It is the most frequent type of harm in families and homes is emotional abuse. And so you might find that with your brain and this dynamic, it's like you're always scanning for that, when to mask, who to perform for, who you're supposed to be. And so I just wanted to read this to you in this book. It says this. He's talking about Daniel Goleman, who wrote the Emotional IQ book, or Emotional Intelligence. It says, Daniel Goleman describes the task of the emotional brain as focusing attention on threats to survival, to make split-second decisions like, do I eat this or does it eat me? That is the root of hypervigilance. The borderlines children, could be anyone, emotionally mature children, are preoccupied with what researchers call risk assessment, with determining the nature of their mother's or anyone's state of mind from one moment to the next. It is an unconscious and involuntary process. They do not realize they are doing it. A thick wall of denial protects children from seeing what is too terrifying to face, right? So in childhood, you must live in denial about this. If you really realize how damaging your parents are in your childhood, then you're screwed essentially. What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? I remember thinking like, well, that's not right and they shouldn't do that and I'm mad at them and they're wrong. But you have no idea, because that's your only comparison. That is the little petri dish in which you grow up in. And if it ended in childhood, that'd be one thing. But the challenge is this often becomes who we are and how we unconsciously scan for risk assessment with everyone and everything, and don't take things at face value. And in that state, we're almost always in a fearful, negative, catastrophized kind of state. So I just, like I said, encourage you to just start to notice, just as the beginning observation. And then certainly things like nervous system regulation, but also working through those relationships. You can learn all the techniques in the world, but if you keep going back into or engaging with the same harmful patterns that set up that for you in the first place, I can promise you that nothing is going to change at the core. So it isn't just learning how to calm and soothe yourself, which is vital, taking walks and cardio and vagus nerve stimulation in ways that help you, but it is also about identifying these patterns and stopping yourself and catching yourself and thinking, okay, I'm absorbing their emotions. Those don't belong to me. Does anything belong to me here? No, it doesn't. Okay, I'm out. I'm going to go work on myself. Or no, I picked up something, but yeah, there's a problem here. I said something kind of rude earlier. I need to go make a repair for that, for example. And that's why they're kind of moody and stomping around. Whatever it is, though, it is really important to understand how this affects the way you approach, silencing your voice, conflict, self-advocacy, people-pleasing, compulsive caretaking, shame, guilt, you name it. It is why I just am so, I believe this is so important to our lives. And P.S., we need hypervigilance, especially now, to live in this world. And if you are any population that is at a higher risk for harm, which is women and pretty much every other underrepresented population, a higher risk population, then you don't want to lose that. You need to be mindful of people's intentions because the world is becoming more and more unsafe. But you also don't want to live in that with people that ideally you've chosen to put in your life. That at the core might be really good, loving people, but it might be hard for you to release that. And so that's why I wanted to share this. Anyway, thanks for being here. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon.